Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start you off with the same maps we've been examining this week. And the first one shows you the last 14 days of precipitation as percent of normal. Now, this particular product comes from the National Weather Service program called AHPS. So it always has a 1-day lag on it. They do quality control for a day before they release the data. So this goes up until yesterday at 7 a.m. But we can still identify so much of the Mississippi and the Ohio and the Great Lakes Basin into New England, straight down to the Gulf of Mexico here, that has been very dry. Now, that's not to ignore other places that have been dry during this time period, but it's just showing kind of this large region that's missed out on a lot of the precipitation. And we just want to look at the pattern that's driving the overall behavior of the weather across the United States. Extremely wet weather has come up the plains, though. This just continues to work on the drought, and I'm pretty excited to see what the new drought monitor is going to look like here on Thursday. The new drought monitor is being set right now. They used data up until yesterday, so we'll get a new map of this tomorrow. Okay, but in the last 24 hours, or actually 72 hours, we've actually seen quite a bit of these storms trying to creep their way into the western Corn Belt. And this, of course, is just still showing up on our maps from the system this weekend that came through and curled into the Carolinas and Virginia. But the storms last night did try to make it their way, pretty far, to the east comparatively to where they've been for such a long time. Now, many of these storms produced a lot more hail yesterday, more severe storms just ripping through this section of the country. And it's the same pattern. We just keep seeing the storms coming up like this. But looking here at the state of Iowa, a place that did finally get some rain, some places in Iowa had already gone more than 2 weeks without precipitation. You can see some of those storms just coming through, this particular area right now. So showing you this, I want to show you just a feature on my website so that you can use it. Why don't we go a little bit farther to the east over toward the Quad Cities. And if you come over here to agweather.com, and it'll look like this when you get there. Sorry, let's let it refresh. There's the top part. You can come over here and start typing in any location in the United States. So how about we go to Moline, Illinois. Got to click on it. It'll put the index number in there and click submit. And then you do click here, and it'll show you a lot of information. So for example, in Moline, I always put a category right up here at the top. Let's blow that up so you can see it. This is the number of days since there's been more than 1/10 of an inch, and it's been 16 days in Moline. So you can come through here and find this, and then slide down and look at all the forecast information plus the historical data down at the bottom. For those of you that use my zip code forecasting tool, I did find a bug yesterday. I apologize for that. These are all prototype tools in the year-to-date temperatures and GDDs. I did get that fixed. I'm sorry. That will now show up for you when you use the zip code tool. But speaking of this, let's go back and just look at the bigger picture here of what was going on. And this is something we're going to continue to see possibly be an issue. Here go the storms through central Iowa, and then they just got into the overnight hours, and they lost kind of the heat of the day and what's needed to keep them to continue. But you also have the concern that there's so much dry air out ahead of this that there's nothing locally to feed on. These storms don't have the local source of moisture in addition to what the Gulf of Mexico provides. And one last thing to take note of here as we watched these storms again through Iowa last night. All sorts of neat outflow boundaries, but see all the flashes here at the very end? Those are all wind turbines. So just kind of neat to show you that we can get some ducting in the beam in the early morning hours, and it'll actually hit the tops of those turbines. Okay, just to show you how stagnant things are, I want to bring up this tweet from the National Weather Service. This one was great. What they did was when they launched the weather balloon the other day, earlier this week, they actually traced how far it moved in the atmosphere as it ascended. And if you look at their tweet, it says that the balloon stayed within 7 miles of their office, and even when it got up to a pressure of 200 millibars, so that's 80% of the way through the density of the atmosphere, or 40,000 feet, it didn't go anywhere. So you just see it floated around. Sometimes when the National Weather Service out of Lincoln, Illinois launches a balloon, it ends up in like Ohio if the winds are strong. But we just didn't have that the other day. And what happened is where the best winds were, they were off a bit farther to the west, like here. Look at the shear blowing the tops off of these storms out of the northeast. So the shear is going this direction. And then you come over here to the central plains, and the storms are getting blown toward the northwest, out of the southwest, toward the northeast. So let me clarify that. Winds are going like this here and like that there. And we're even watching a low curling up right over this area. But you get east of here, and we just don't have that shear in place. So it looks something like this. This is this morning. This is what the winds look like across North America. And what I want to show you is the problem we're dealing with. And that is if we go deep into the atmosphere, let's go back up there where that balloon will get. This is what the winds look like aloft. So subtropical branches coming in. Look at this. This is just exactly what you want to see if you want to get storms in these areas. But as we talked about, it's splitting. There's just a big vacancy in this region where we don't have good flow. So for example, right now over parts of Indiana and Ohio, the winds aloft are actually as weak as they are at the surface. So the jet stream level winds are non-existent in these pockets, and normally they're moving. So that's the issue, and we're waiting to see this particular pattern evolve. Now, is it going to evolve soon? Right now, the models continue to say we're going to come out of this retracted and weakened jet toward a poleward shift but more normal momentum. So we talked about this yesterday. It's going to go from here to doing something a bit more like this. And what we want to see is, are the forecasts consistently showing that? Because right now, this flow is weak. So here's the retracted jet. Here's the subtropical component. And as I just take you through the next couple of weeks here, we're just looking for anything to help that jet extend and just reposition itself across the Pacific. So by June 7th, it's gone from here to now opening up like this. That's that poleward movement. The subtropical jet is still here, but by June 7th, we still have the weak flow. This is the catalyst for change we're looking at over here in the Pacific Ocean. So let's move past June 7th toward the 8th and 9th, and this is the time frame I'm watching for the pattern to change. So we still have, unfortunately, another 10 days of this same pattern that's in place. And sorry, if we keep going there, what we've got is once we get out there past the 11th and 12th, okay, the Pacific jet did its work. We're going to start to see flow flattening out a little bit in here, and maybe the subtropical component feeding more into the central United States. And this right here, I mean, this is almost out. This is day 13, excuse me. We need to get that. That's the flow that's got to return. Just some direction. I don't care from which. It's just got to pick up a little bit. Until then, we just continue to deal with this. So your next 7 days of precipitation, there are places here in the eastern Great Lakes and surrounding states that may measure nothing for another 7 days, or maybe even out to 10 or 11 days. Same thing for the lower Mississippi River Valley. There will be isolated storms in pockets, but the wettest conditions are going to be with this potential system that's curling up down here. I'll show you that one in a few moments. And then this is storms right where they've been. That same corridor where the weaker flow is at least coming into the country and making the turn. So that's it. That is the pattern. Now, I mentioned a moment ago something happening down into the Gulf of Mexico. And this is right now the newest update from the National Hurricane Center's new 7-day graphical outlook. And they've given it a 20% chance of cyclone development. Now, this is not a big tropical system we're concerned about here, but it is moving toward Florida. And so to show you what that looks like, take a look here. So starting off at 6 a.m., now I'm just going to point out things. You're just going to see flashes of green all in this area. And there's going to be some isolated showers here, but just flashes of green, thunderstorms. That's the model initializing that convection. But take a look right down here. In the Gulf of Mexico, we've got a little spin. And we're going to watch this as it curls up toward the Gulf Coast, bringing in rounds of showers and storms here. And it will eventually just start to meander its way late this weekend over toward Florida. Now, while that's occurring, you can see another weak low that's sitting off of the Carolina coast, and that's going to bring in scattered showers and some cloud cover to the Carolinas as we go through the day on Thursday, getting into Friday. Now, if you come back to the central part of the United States, remember, we're just getting this and we're getting this. So what happens is storms just keep popping off the mountains. They pop out in the plains, and isolated events start to show up here in the midsection of the country. But this is all hit or miss. This is that time frame where if you get the rain, you're in business, but if you miss it, then we're just waiting for the next opportunity. So that's what is happening over the next 3 days, which contributes to the 7-day forecast map looking something like this. Now from there, I want to show you a quick model comparison. The European model out for the next 7 days looks exactly the same as it has for the last few days. That's your 7-day forecast. Again, very consistent with the WPC. This is the newest update from the GFS. And as we've been talking about, when you compare the European to the GFS is much more generous on the moisture. So remind you, this map shows you that if you're in these colors, the GFS is wetter by this many inches than the European. And if you're in these colors, the European is wetter by this many inches than the GFS. So we see that the European's wettest here and also down with the system coming across Florida. But the GFS is more generous to this region, including parts of New England as well. We need to kind of talk a bit about why that is. So here's the issue. The European model leaves the incredibly weak flow throughout a big section here of North America. And it opens this flow much more generously to this trough that's over New England. There's lows over California, so the flow still comes around. It still enters the Northwest like this, but just nothing in the middle. Now take a look closely at that, because what I want to compare it to is the GFS at the same time. Now notice the GFS, rather than opening that wave, cuts it off here. And that brings in cooler weather sooner, and it also brings in better chances for rain in this trough. I don't root for models, but I am in the drought area, and so I know what I want. And so I'm watching for the GFS to get this right. It has been the quickest, though, to fill in the holes. So going from day 7 out there to day, well, let's just take it all the way out there to day 16. But the only place it leaves with lower chances of rainfall are right in through here. So just keep that in mind as we go forward here with this forecast. Okay, I want to also point out that the GFS has been lower performing than the European has as of late. I want to thank Ryan Maui for letting me use this graphic. He puts together a skill score of the performance of the models and matching the 5-day pattern. So GFS is in red, European models in blue. But from there, I do want to show you the latest updates on the week 2. So CPC last night just continued to isolate this area as getting into week 2 favoring drier conditions. The European model made a wetter trend in this region, so did the GFS. So they are still drier into week 2 than normal, but the trend has been up in terms of precipitation. All right. From here, let's talk about what the temperature is going to do, because today is going to feel definitely like summer in the midsection of the country here. It's cooler east, it's cooler south compared to normal, and cooler west. So getting into Thursday, much of the same. Friday, that's going to be a very hot one compared to normal for this large quadrant here. Then we get into Saturday and Sunday, a couple things begin to shift. The heat comes back into the west. But as we go into Monday and Tuesday, we're waiting to see if we can get this heat out and return it to some ridges in the west. So over the next 7 days, not much change in this map of your total accumulated GDDs. And from here, let's go look at evaporation. Really no change in this as well. We're still watching for about 1.5 to 1.75 inches of evaporation, which is why there's the concern of the flash drought right in through this corridor. And then we can go from here into what the longer term forecasts are suggesting. Now look at the difference between the models. This is the next 5 days based on the ECMWF. Okay, so that's pretty consistent with the GFS, and this is the ensemble forecast of the GFS. So European, GFS. Where there's a difference is this. This is the new European day 5 through 10. Now, if you remember, it parks the trough here, doesn't open it up there. But the GFS does. And because of that, GFS for day 5 through 10, I mean, this is the end of this week through the middle of next week, brings cooler air in quicker and shoves the heat back farther to the west. That is the next play in the models we're watching to make a difference. But the European ensemble does this just a little bit later. So I'm starting you off on day 5 through 10. That gets you out June 5th through June 10th. And then as we play this out, we notice that heat is retreating. But the question is, where's that moisture coming from? Now, as I start to plan for my in-depth report tomorrow night, I do want to stress that one of the big factors we'll be discussing is the evolution of these ocean temperatures. So this goes from March all the way up until yesterday, looking at the evolution of El Nino, the cold water signal that's off the west coast, which was a part of the PDO pattern, and the very warm water we have here in the Atlantic. All of these things need to be discussed, and we'll do that tomorrow night. So I appreciate your extra attention this morning. We'll talk again soon. Thanks.